ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you tonight with only humility and respect in my heart. I am grateful to be given the opportunity to speak, and for those who are willing to listen. I know that my decision has divided the community. That was never my intent. I know that my decision has been the source of much controversy, and that is good. Whether you agree with me or not, I only ask that when you leave this gathering, find out everything there is to know about this war. It was determined after Nuremberg and the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunals that the greatest threat to international peace, the greatest crime against humanity, was and is engaging in a war of aggression. A war of aggression was codified as the international crime against the peace because it enabled all other war crimes to including genocide. But for all that Saddam was and was doing in March of 2003, or since 1991 for that matter, he was not engaged in a war of aggression. He was, as Colin Powell and Condoleezza Rice said in 2001, quote, contained and not a threat, end quote. President Bush himself declared that there was no connection between Iraq and 9/11 and that no one in the administration ever suggested that link. As concluded by the bipartisan 9/11 Commission, there was no collaborative ties between Saddam and Al-Qaeda. As concluded by the Iraq Survey Group, there were no WMD produced in Iraq after 1991 and none present in 2003. Retired veteran CIA officers and analysts have come out publicly to state that intelligence was manipulated to fit a policy of regime change. 80% of the Iraqi people, when polled earlier this year, believe the American occupation is worsening the sectarian violence. And they want the troops out of their country immediately and within 6 months. These are the facts, and they are undisputable. Saddam Hussein was indeed a brutal, murderous tyrant in a long line of brutal, murderous tyrants propped up and supported by the U.S. government to fit the needs and ideology of a select few within our society, and removed by force when they became an inconvenience. But Saddam's treatment of his people was not the reason we went to war. It was not the reason Congress authorized force. It was not the reason why many Americans supported this war in the first place. Instead, it was fear. It was intentionally manipulated fear. We were told by our government that we trusted that Saddam would use his stockpiles of nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons on us at any time. And because of his ties to Al-Qaeda, this threat was imminent. I know now that this is entirely untrue, as many of us do. And it was a manipulation of the American people and a betrayal of our trust. The soldiers dying in Iraq today are the consequence of that betrayal. It is my opinion that a crime has been committed. A crime has been committed against the Constitution. We pride ourselves on having a unique democracy of checks and balances, separation of powers, 3 separate but equal branches of government, all to prevent that which is hated and feared the most: tyranny, authoritarianism, and oppression by those who hold power. When one branch of government intentionally deceives another branch to gain an authorization for an illegal war, that is a flagrant violation of the Constitution. It is a base violation of our democracy. It is the beginning of the end of freedom. As Hermann Goering admits, all the government has to do is to instill fear among the people, cast doubts on the detractors, and they will have any war they want. It is my personal belief that we have been lied to, deceived, and betrayed. And every day that we allow this, Every day that we allow this deception to continue, more and more of our sons and daughters will pay the price. More and more of our hard-earned tax dollars go down the drain when they could be used for far more noble purposes like health care, education, and providing for disadvantaged Americans. Ask yourself what $8 billion a week could buy. There are those within our society who have the most to gain from deception, the most to profit. There never were any WMDs, there never was any ties to international terrorism. But for those who have something to gain from war, that is not what they would like us to believe. So of course, I fell for it, along with many, many Americans. I believed in our leaders, and like many other Americans, I asked, what could I do for my country? We were used and defrauded, manipulated through fear and poverty to fight a war not out of necessity, not of defending our loved ones, but for a war of choice, profit, and aggression for the wealthy few. When I finally learned the hard truth, I began to see the world in a different light than how I had viewed it 3 years ago. Only when I realized that I still had a choice. Sure, I could go to prison, but I still had that choice. And after what seemed an eternity, I saw my freedom and I took it back. We as leaders and officers explain to our soldiers during training why they are doing what we tell them to do. Because belief in your task makes a better soldier. But in this war, I could no longer explain to my soldiers why we were fighting and be telling them the truth. How could I order men to die for something I believe to be absolutely wrong? As leaders, as an officer, we must stick our necks out and take that first step. In ancient times, officers were in front of their armies. It was time to do what soldiers swear an oath to do. And that wasn't simply to only go off and fight wars, but it was to defend this country from all threats, foreign and domestic. I hated to leave my troops, but something had to be done to stop this insanity. I could help my soldiers best by not going along with this stupidity, but by actively standing against it. It was a long shot, but I would try. I would try for the soldiers who had been lost and those still trying to stay alive. So I made the decision. In my resignation letter, I stated that I could no longer condone or enable the lawlessness of the highest levels of my leadership. I realized in refusing, I would in essence be serving the will of the people to whose trust had been placed upon me. I was doing what I could, non-violently and in accordance with my oath. I was upholding our moral values and our democratic principles. We do not torture. We do not unilaterally invade, occupy, and exploit sovereign nations. And we do not allow the power of governance to be corrupted and consolidated into the hands of a privileged few. There have been some who have said that it is not my right, nor place, nor responsibility to resist the illegal orders of our government. I wish these people could have stood at Auschwitz, then at Nuremberg, and tried to defend the Germans with that argument. So I ask you, whose responsibility is it to stop an illegal and immoral war? And my answer to you, it becomes the responsibility of anyone who is willing to do something about it. And wearing the uniform is not, and it is never, an excuse. Thank you very much.